Sonic Boom Episode 18, Too Good to Be True. We start out with some badniks being attacked off-screen, and Six throws something unclear at a badnik. Then Sonic slips on an oil slick from a robot. Dave, who tries to be badass with his horrible voice, shoots burgers from a Nerf gun at a robot and somehow expects it to work. Then Amy slips and falls into Knuckles' arms, and he says with a smooth voice that he knew she'd fall for him, and she's flattered. Sonic says they should get matching uniforms, and Knuckles kicks some badnik materials at the robot to damage it, and punches the ground to make shockwaves to save the day. I wish Knuckles was always like this. The show sucks at betraying him. It just embarrasses the show that this is the way it should be, and it isn't. I see no logical reason for why this isn't the normal thing, aside from him flirting with Amy, I guess, but even then, who cares if that happens or not? We see the good Knuckles get hit by lasers and get warped to the real Boom universe, where the heroes lampshade his vocabulary. Amy says that their Knuckles can wear something to distinguish himself. The heroes naturally lampshade that the other Knuckles is smart. Yeah, and why does he sound like a wannabe Superman? He has the same DNA as Knuckles. Does he have the same past, with the exception that he didn't get brain damage? He says that Dave is the opposite of his normal self, and Tails just now figures out that Knuckles is from another dimension, and they're surprised? What? Why is he so blown away? It's such a waste of time that Sonic takes so long to say whom, because Facetious Beaver just happens to be here for no reason. Tails asks Good Knuckles what the last thing he remembers is. He says that Sonic had tried to save him from lasers but was too clumsy and fell, and he wonders if the Eggman in this dimension could have interdimensional teleportation technology. And he just assumes that he has it to take already. And Sonic actually says that they're not aggressors and they have to be patient. The writer actually lampshaded how inactive and passive the heroes are against Eggman. But it's justified here where Eggman is just a minor nuisance, not someone they feel like they should be trying to take down at all costs. But still, what Sonic said was unacceptable. Why can't they just break into Eggman's base? We see Good Knuckles fighting with heroic music, while the bad Knuckles starts glitching out trying to disappear with a fever. Because somehow, having two of them in the same dimension is causing him to start disappearing. This has never been the case in any of the Sonic franchise. The battery between the two dimensions is eroding, apparently, or whatever. This really contradicts other continuities. Did the writer do no research at all? Obviously. This doesn't even make sense. Good Knuckles gets trapped in an electric net that somehow doesn't kill him. As I wonder why this is happening to him when, come on, this didn't happen in Archie or Underground. Of course, even Good Knuckles got kidnapped and needed to be saved because we need to pad out the episode by having Sonic and his friends have the final fight. Well, good, that gives the fight more variety. Sonic breaks down the wall and Good Knuckles snarks at Sonic ungratefully. Amy tells Eggman what's going on, and Eggman somehow comes to the conclusion on his own that two Knuckles could cause a catastrophic anomaly. No one would ever assume that was the case. It's too ridiculous. Sonic casually asks Eggman for help, and he lampshades that he should have just asked him in the first place. Well, yeah, of course he'd save his own planet. Wait, what? The planet's at stake and not just the Knuckleses? Tails briefly has to change batteries on the device to send Good Knuckles home, so they stand there awkwardly for a while. It's kind of sad, actually, that Good Knuckles has to leave. It was sad when he referenced an awkward moment, and Six says that people follow her when she walks away. But sadly, he has to leave instead of permanently replacing Bad Knuckles, who has nothing good about him, and throwing the fans a bone instead of continuing to piss us off. Like, this would have been the perfect opportunity for the writer to fix his mistakes. They could, combine the two Knuckles together. But no. This episode was about giving us a taste of what the show should have been like, and easily could have been like, and then ripping it away at the end. It's like the writer realized, or at least heard from fan feedback, how horribly they're portraying Knuckles, And instead of changing him because it's too late to change the status quo now, even in a show with no continuity that can get away with it, instead he has this new good Knuckles show up from another dimension. Although I'm impressed that the show was gutsy enough to have another dimension, when I thought only Archie would be gutsy enough to do that. They're trying to make a big deal out of the fact that he's good at punching, can create a shockwave by punching the ground, and is snarky, but really he's just the serious Knuckles we want, but with a funny voice. Aside from him guarding the Master Emerald because he doesn't do that, this is the exact Knuckles that everyone wants and imagines. Knuckles is already known for doing this stuff. And while he's portrayed as smart here, and like a fortune cookie, that's just the voice. Really, he's just being snarky and serious, which is how the real Knuckles would be on a daily basis. They were too lazy to even give him a different design. They missed an obvious opportunity to make him look like the real Knuckles, which obviously everyone wanted. And the only explanation is that they were too cheap to spend the money on a new model for him. It's already unbelievable enough as it is that the alternate versions of the Boom characters would all look identical to them, complete with wearing the exact same redundant bandages. Really? They couldn't have worn different clothes? That's already ridiculous and arbitrary enough. It wouldn't happen twice. Archie didn't make these mistakes. I know it has flaws, but it didn't make all the mistakes of this show. It also didn't make the ridiculous mistake of having multiple versions of a character in one universe. It caused them both to start glitching out. That doesn't make any sense. Why would Eggman just assume that without being told? Why did he assume the entire universe was at stake and decide to help them, instead of just letting himself get rid of Knuckles, since it seemed like that's the only thing it would do? I don't see the point of giving him a different voice when he has the same DNA. Somehow, just to distinguish him when a different design would have been the obvious choice. I saw him being competent in the fight, and it just made me wonder why Knuckles wasn't always this competent in the show. They portray it as a joke because he's over-the-top ridiculously badass, but he's just being the way Knuckles is always expected to be. I even liked his flirting with Amy. It was nice to see Knuckles get thrown a bone for once. But of course it was temporary. While on the bright side, it's more merciful that it's a real Knuckles somewhere, and not just Knuckles writing fanfiction glorifying himself, which I assumed it was, and easily could have been. It didn't really take advantage of the concept of an alternate universe Knuckles, because he spent all his time on this world. And aside from his Sonic being clumsy and admiring him, there's no attempt at showing how his world was creatively different. So what was the point? That was so restrained. Would it kill the show to have world building? No, that would require too much creativity and cause anxiety to the writers. Wouldn't it be common sense to have him and his friends have different clothes at least? To not live on a tropical island? To have an Eggman that's ruling the world already when he has the power to transport Knuckles to another zone at will? Why doesn't he just do it again and keep doing it until the good Knuckles never comes back? Well, on the bright side, at least the show is creative enough to have the other Knuckles not be an evil twin. Because that just raised the question of how he's evil when he has the same DNA as him and no established parents. But by making him competent Knuckles instead, well, one, that's not creative because that's how he usually is outside of Boom. But two, it raises the question of how he's this way when the other Knuckles is not. And while it's lampshaded, it's not explained. It'd take one sentence for Boom Knuckles to say that he got a lot of head injuries in his lifetime. Even The Simpsons explained that Homer is dumb because he shoved a crayon in his nose. That's cartoony enough for the show, right? I guess him having too many concussions in his life would be too depressing of an explanation for why he's an idiot. But that has to be it if there's another universe where he's smart. Because he's got the same brain as him from birth. Otherwise he wouldn't be the same person. Unless in Smart Knuckles' universe, Boom Locke bioengineered him to be smart. Maybe his father used the Master Emerald to make him this way, while our Knuckles' father used it in a slightly different way for his son. That makes perfect sense because there's a lot of different ways his father could have decided to make his son a good guardian. There could be a Knuckles with a different magical ability for every universe. I don't give a shit that Locke just happened to show up in Archie. We've never seen how Knuckles' father is in Boom, so he's Locke by default. If they didn't want me to see it as the default, then they should have established more families for him than that. And besides, Archie came first. So it set the standard for a lot of things. Sonic Boom Episode 18-2, Beyond the Valley of Cubots. We start out with Tails saying he's making an auto-adjuster machine. Could you even make that? He then gets worried because he lost one of his inventions and calls it his baby. And inexplicably, a woman with a baby talks to him in his own house just to make a snarky remark. Then he blames Eggman for stealing from him, and they laugh about underwear because it's just a children's show. It's predictable that Eggman wasn't the one who stole from Tails, because he's not threatening enough in this show. I like his remark that he just rebuilt that door from the last time it was broken down. Eggman complains that his worst nightmares come true, and Orbot and Cubot talk about a nightmare they have involving standing in a puddle of their own oil. Oil is blood to them. Eggman says that he can't think like a robot, and sends Orbot and Cubot to find where the Renegator's hiding. So they wander in circles through the jungle, and Orbot finally contrasts Cubot by saying they're lost and he's hopeless, and taking away the compass. They get caught in a net, but before that can continue, Cubot sees a bunch of other Cubots, and says they're the handsomest robots in the world. I like this idea, though I don't know why Eggman would program him to be vain. It's amusing that Orbot has to take off the guy's hat to reveal to Cubot that he's the same model robot, but that's also forced. All of these guys are prototypes of Cubot who were deemed not good enough after being programmed and tested. So, obviously, Eggman gave up when he got to Cubot. And somehow there are already tunnels behind the posters in Eggman's base just so they could avoid being recycled. That's ridiculous. If they're idiots, they wouldn't think to make tunnels. One of the Cubots, a girl, began to malfunction, and they need tools to fix her. And one of them tries to use a ray gun to put out a fire for no reason. So, more forcedness. Although at least it is kind of justified, but no it isn't. Eggman would have to intentionally program the Cubots to be that stupid. How could that happen as the result of a glitch? That's some glitch. So, all of their behavior is forced comedy. Cubot reveals that he learns from his mistakes because he put sand on fire. The female Cubot makes me feel sorry for her. She's barking and staring into space. Cubot naturally can't help, and Orbot wonders if they can use Tails to help. And for some reason, the Cubots all move away in weird directions when Cubot tells them to follow him. Cubot and Orbot wake up Sonic and Tails when they're arbitrarily napping outside in the open, begging for Eggman to bother them. So Tails has no problem helping an ex-robot of Eggman's. Cubot thinks the female Cubot is better than ever when she immediately runs into something. I question why Tails doesn't fix all the Cubots to not be horribly broken and glitchy. He doesn't even say that it would take too much time. He'll never do it. And Tails gets back the stolen stuff exactly the way it was left, so he's happy instead of mad. And Sonic tells the Cubots that they don't have to steal stuff anymore because they can get Tails' help. And yet Tails won't make them not stupid anymore. So, that's selfish of him. That would be a better use of his time than making bumbling inventions. The Cubots want Cubot to stay because he's smarter than the rest of them. Orbot says he'll return home to their beloved Eggman. So they love him, but they betray him constantly? Huh? And somehow Eggman forgot Cubot's name at first. And Orbot arbitrarily tells Eggman the truth about everything. Eggman then reveals that Orbot is the perfect Cubot, even though he looks nothing like him, so that's dumb. And he has to get Cubot back just because he knows too much about his base's secrets, even though the heroes break into his base pathetically easily. So what's the point? What secrets could the base possibly have? And the writer's too lazy to tell us any of those secrets. He then remembers that he had been smart enough to plant a tracking device on Cubot. One of the Cubots presses the self-destruct button on them. That happened to exist for no reason. And I'm expected to believe this has happened more than once. And Cubot misses Orbot because he can't snark at him. He tells them all to run from Eggman's machine, and he lampshades them all standing there. Tails kicks away a Badnik, and someone else does something as well. It's so forgettable. Tails picks up and flies away with a Cubot to save him from some lasers, being sweet enough to save one of Eggman's robots. And Cubot sweetly apologizes to Orbot. Orbot says amusingly that he's come to expect this sort of thing from him, and he reassures him that Eggman has to get him back because he's the perfect robot. Aw, we needed this kind of thing from Scratch and Grounder. Cubot hugs Eggman inside, but sadly just tells him to get off. Sonic runs around a robot to tie its arms around itself, and Eggman blames Cubot for it and retreats. Sonic responsibly decides to move all the Cubots to where they'll be relatively safe. I don't know why Tails won't just reprogram all of them to be better. Well, I'm sure they'd be uncomfortable with their minds being tampered with, but then just show us them saying that. Wouldn't it be an easy source of conflict with these guys to have Tails take it upon himself to try to reprogram them? And I was shocked that the episode ended before we could see where the Cubots were moved to. Why do that? That's dumb. That's so lazy. I really didn't need to see Cubot and Orbot mopping the floor of Eggman's base. This episode was about Cubot and Orbot meeting a village of rejected Cubots who are naturally really glitchy in their programming, so they're unbelievably stupid, enough to self-destruct themselves. At which point, how the hell have they survived this long on their own? Why did Eggman think Cubot was such a threat that he needed a self-destruct button, let alone a whole bunch of Cubots? The entire foundation was forced because there's no explanation for why there's tunnels to escape Eggman's base hidden behind posters on his wall that are just conveniently there for the Cubots to escape from. How did they know about those tunnels? And Eggman's excuse to get Cubot back was way too weak. It'd make more sense for him to come after him to dismantle him for spare parts, and then Cubot could beg him not to at the last minute. Or even better, Cubot could come back to Eggman on his own because he wasn't having any fun with these idiots. I was impressed with Eggman for thinking to have a tracking device in Cubot though. But Tails barely even tried to help the Cubots. All we needed was one line to explain that the Cubots would feel uncomfortable with Tails reprogramming them to be less stupid. I like the revelation that Cubot is a prototype of Orbot because it explains why he's dumb and Orbot is smarter. But it wasn't necessary. At least there's a little resolution because the Cubots don't need to steal materials for themselves anymore, because Sonic told them that they can just ask Tails for help. But I was shocked that the episode ended before we could see where Sonic relocated them to. Where could he possibly move them to that's safer than a desert? In a forest you can follow all the trees. In a mountain you can fall on the rocks. Why the hell couldn't the episode have ended with Eggman winning and using the Cubots for spare parts? Using a giant tractor beam to kidnap all of them. I would have been impressed with the show for giving Eggman a victory for a change and reminding us why that's a bad thing, so that we can care more when the heroes do win, even if it'd be dark. At least it'd be an ending I can actually visualize. With this ending, I can only assume that Sonic relocated them to a field somewhere. I guess it makes sense that this version of Eggman's so flighty and ditzy that he'd only think to give a tracking device to the Cubot we know best, so that's why he didn't track down the Cubot army. He's really lucky they're so stupid, because if they were smarter, having an entire army of rogue robots would be a disaster waiting to happen because they have every reason to resent him. That's another missed opportunity with the episode. If these guys are so stupid, couldn't we have seen them try to attack Eggman's base to humorous results? Of course, the question is, how would they ever get that far from the desert? They can't fly. It would take a long time for them to get to his base. Isn't it on an island? It's sad when the ending is so abrupt and lazy that a random fan of the internet can immediately rewrite it to be more fulfilling and enjoyable. I guess it was written on a Friday. Well, I did like the idea of this episode. I really loved seeing the emphasis in how Orbot contrasts Cubot. I loved that he complained about Cubot getting him lost and grabbed something away from him. The two robots are really amusing. I still didn't laugh, but it was enjoyable seeing Orbot do stuff like move a hat so Cubot can tell the robot's a prototype of himself. And it was sweet to see their friendship get reaffirmed when Cubot apologized to Orbot. It was nice of Orbot to not get really mad at Cubot for deciding to stay with the Cubots at first.